I'm parked outside the house again. It's the third time I've driven here this month, and the second time I've actually gotten out of the car. The farmhouse looks smaller than I remember, they always do, don't they? But it's not the size that stops me at the gate. It's knowing what's still inside. What I put back. I told myself I was coming here to finally list the property. Get it off my hands after 6 years of paying taxes on an empty building. But if I'm being honest with you, and I think I need to be, for this to make any sense, I came back because I had a dream about the box 3 nights ago. And I haven't slept right since. Let me go back. Not to the dream, I'll get to that, but to 2018, when my grandmother finally passed. Eleanor Vance. 91 years old, sharp as a tack until the last 3 weeks when the pneumonia took hold and she just receded. Like watching someone walk backward into fog. She'd lived in this house since 1967, raised my mother here, watched my mother leave and never really come back. I was the one who visited. Every summer until I was 16, then sporadically through college, then more often once I realized she was getting older and I was running out of time. She left me the house. Just me. My mother got the bank accounts, my uncle got the car, and I got 40 acres and a farmhouse that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. The lawyers told me I could sell it as is, but the real estate agent said I'd get twice as much if I cleaned it out first. Made it look like a home instead of a time capsule. So in March of 2019, I took 2 weeks off work and drove down from Portland. Just me and a rented dumpster and about 40 boxes of contractor bags. I figured it would be sad but manageable. Cathartic, even. That's the word I kept using when people asked. Cathartic. I had no idea what I was walking into. And I mean that literally. Because on my first full day there, when I was clearing out the upstairs bedrooms, I noticed something wrong with the wall in what used to be the nursery. I need to describe the nursery because it matters. It was the smallest bedroom, tucked at the end of the upstairs hallway, with one window that faced the barn. My grandmother had used it as a sewing room for as long as I could remember. There was an old Singer machine in there, bolts of fabric she never got around to using, patterns from decades past still in their paper envelopes. But when I was very young, maybe 4 or 5, I remember it differently. I remember a crib. A mobile with little wooden birds. Yellow curtains. And I remember my grandmother closing the door very firmly whenever I wandered too close, telling me that room wasn't for playing in. I asked my mother about it once. She said I was misremembering. The wall I'm talking about was the interior wall, the one shared with the hallway. Plaster overlaid, like most of the house. But here's the thing, and I wouldn't have noticed this if I hadn't been methodically emptying the room and really looking at the space for the first time in years, the wall didn't sit right. The baseboard had a seam in it. Not a joint where 2 pieces of wood met, but a visible line, like someone had cut through it and filled the gap with caulk that had yellowed over time. And once I saw that seam, I couldn't unsee how the wall itself seemed newer. Not by much. But the plaster was smoother there. Less cracked. Like a patch over a wound. I should have left it alone. That's what a sensible person would have done. Noted it as a quirk, maybe mentioned it to the real estate agent, and moved on. But I've never been particularly sensible when it comes to mysteries, and this felt like one. Why would my grandmother seal up part of a wall? What was she hiding? Or, and this thought came later, darker, what was she keeping in? I went down to the barn and found a pry bar that had belonged to my grandfather. It was rusted but solid. And I stood in front of that wall for probably 10 minutes, just holding the bar, before I finally wedged it into the seam at the baseboard and pulled. The plaster came away easier than I expected. It wasn't old plaster, I mean, it was old by now, but it had been applied over something, not as part of the original construction. Behind it was bare lathe, and behind that was a space. Not a room. Nothing that dramatic. Just a hollow in the wall, maybe 2 feet wide and 3 feet tall, like someone had framed out a section and then decided to seal it up. And sitting in that hollow, resting on a piece of burlap that had gone stiff with age, was a box. Cedar, I think, or something like it. About the size of a shoebox but deeper. Brass hinges, tarnished almost black. A small brass latch, unlocked. And on the lid, in handwriting I recognized as my grandmother's, 2 words in faded ink, for after. I need to pause here. Because I'm sitting in my car right now, looking at the house, and I can feel my hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. Even after 6 years. Even knowing what I know. Some of you listening might think I'm being dramatic. That's fine. But I want you to understand something. The moment I read those words, for after, I felt a cold certainty settle into my chest. Not fear exactly. Something older than fear. Recognition, maybe. Like a part of me had always known that Wall wasn't right. That my grandmother had been keeping something from me. From everyone. And now, with her gone, it was finally time for me to know. I didn't open the box right away. I took it downstairs, set it on the kitchen table, that old Formica table with the chrome legs that my grandmother had owned since the 60s, and I made coffee. The box sat there while the percolator did its work, and I sat across from it like we were about to have a conversation. The cedar smell was strong despite the years. There was dust in the grain, white plaster powder caught in the brass. I wiped it clean with a dish towel before I realized I was preparing it. Making it presentable. As if whatever was inside deserved ceremony. Maybe it did. The latch opened with a soft click. The hinges didn't creak, they'd been oiled at some point, protected from the air by the seal. Inside, there was tissue paper. The kind you'd use for wrapping gifts, but old and yellowed and brittle. I lifted it carefully, and beneath it I found 3 things arranged with obvious intention. A photograph. A lock of hair tied with a pale blue ribbon. And a letter in an envelope addressed to no one, sealed with a circle of red wax that had cracked but not broken. The photograph was on top. I picked it up first. It was a picture of a baby. Black and white, the edges scalloped in that way old photographs used to be. The baby was lying in a bassinet, not a crib, but one of those wicker bassinets people used before playpens became common. The blanket was pale, knitted in a pattern I recognized because my grandmother had made the same pattern for my cousin's baby in 2008. The baby's eyes were closed. Its hands were curled into little fists near its chin. And written on the back, in that same handwriting, James Elliott Vance, April 3, 1952 to April 19, 1952. 16 days. My grandmother had a son who lived for 16 days, and no one in my family had ever mentioned him. I sat with that photograph for a long time. The coffee went cold. The light shifted through the kitchen window, moving across the table like a slow tide. And I kept looking at that baby's face, trying to find something of my grandmother in it, or my mother, or myself. He would have been my uncle. He would have been older than my mother by almost a decade. The nursery, the room with the yellow curtains and the mobile with the wooden birds, had been his. And my grandmother had lived in that house for another 50 years, walking past that door every single day, knowing what was sealed inside the wall. Knowing and saying nothing. The lock of hair was so fine it was almost translucent. Baby hair. That pale, downy fuzz that newborns have before their real hair comes in. It was tied with a ribbon that had once been blue but had faded to something closer to gray, and when I held it up to the light from the window, I could see individual strands catching the sun like spider silk. I didn't hold it for long. It felt too private somehow. Too much like holding a piece of someone who should have been allowed to become a person. I set it back in the box gently, and then I looked at the letter. The envelope was heavy paper, the kind that used to be called stationery. No name on the front. Just a circle of red wax with no seal pressed into it, just a thumbprint, I realized. My grandmother's thumbprint, preserved in wax for almost 70 years. I didn't open it right away. I think part of me knew that once I read whatever was inside, I wouldn't be able to unread it. And I was already dealing with enough. A secret brother to my mother. A sealed wall. A box labeled for after, as if my grandmother had known someone would eventually come looking. As if she'd wanted them to find it. But only after she was gone. I'm going to tell you what the letter said, but I need you to understand the state I was in when I read it. I'd been in that house alone for 2 days. I hadn't slept well, the furnace made sounds I'd forgotten, and every creak of the old wood felt like someone walking just outside my door. I'd been drinking my grandmother's coffee from her old percolator, which was both comforting and deeply strange. And now I was sitting at her table, holding her secrets in my hands, about to read words she'd written decades before I was born. Words she'd hidden in a wall. Words she'd never intended for anyone to find until she was safely beyond all questions. The letter was dated June 14, 1952. Almost 2 months after James died. The paper was thin, almost onion skin, and her handwriting was smaller than, more precise, like she'd been rationing space. It began without preamble. I am writing this because I need to put it somewhere, and I cannot put it in my mind anymore. It is too heavy to carry alone, but there is no one I can tell. So I will tell this paper, and this paper will wait in the wall, and perhaps no one will ever read it, and perhaps that is for the best. But if someone does, if you are reading this now, whoever you are, then I need you to know that I loved him. I loved him completely. And what happened was not my fault. She wrote about the pregnancy first. How she and my grandfather had been trying for years. How she'd had 2 miscarriages before James, she called them the lost ones, and how she'd spent the whole 9 months terrified that she'd lose him too. But she didn't. He was born healthy, 7 pounds, crying like he was angry at the world for making him wait so long. She wrote about bringing him home to the farmhouse, to the nursery she'd spent months preparing. The yellow curtains. The mobile with the wooden birds that my grandfather had carved by hand. She wrote about the first night, lying awake listening to him breathe through the baby monitor, counting the seconds between each exhale. And then she wrote about the sound. I'm going to quote her directly here, because I couldn't paraphrase this if I tried. On the 9th night, I heard something through the monitor that was not James. A voice. Very faint, like someone whispering from the far end of a long hallway. I could not make out words, but the rhythm was wrong. Too regular. Too patient. Like someone counting. I went to his room and he was asleep, peaceful, but the air felt different. Colder. And there was a smell I did not recognize. Something sweet and old at the same time. I told myself I imagined it. I told myself I was tired. But I started sleeping in the rocking chair beside his crib after that. Just in case. I need to stop here and tell you that when I read this part of the letter, I almost put it down. Not because I was scared, not yet, but because I recognized something. When I was very small, maybe 3 or 4, I spent a night in that nursery. I don't remember why. Maybe my usual room was too cold, or maybe there was a storm and I was frightened. But I remember lying in a cot that my grandmother had set up for me, and I remember hearing something through the walls. A voice. Faint, rhythmic, patient. I remember calling for my grandmother and her coming immediately, like she'd been waiting just outside the door. I remember her face in the moonlight, and how she picked me up without saying a word and carried me to her own room. I slept in her bed that night, and I never slept in the nursery again. Back to the letter. My grandmother continued, for 6 more nights, I stayed with him. I slept when he slept, woke when he woke. And every night, I heard the voice. It never got louder, but it got clearer. I began to make out words. Not English. Something older. Something that felt like it had been spoken before there was anyone to hear it. But there was one word I understood. One word that came through every time, right at the end, like a name or a summons. James. It was saying his name. And on the 15th night, when I heard it say his name, my son opened his eyes and looked at the corner of the room. Not at me. At the corner where the wall met the ceiling. And he smiled. I should tell you that my grandfather is mentioned only once in this entire letter. A single line. William says I am imagining things, that new mothers have vivid dreams in tired minds. He sleeps downstairs now. He cannot hear what I hear. That's it. That's all she wrote about the man she spent the rest of her life with. And I don't know what that means, whether he genuinely didn't believe her, or whether he was too frightened to stay in that room, or whether something else was happening in their marriage that the letter doesn't address. All I know is that on the 16th night, my grandmother was alone in that nursery with her son. And something happened that she spent the rest of her life trying to wall away. Here's what she wrote. I fell asleep. I did not mean to. I had been awake for so long, and my body simply stopped obeying me. When I woke, it was still dark. The room was very cold. And there was something standing by the crib. I say something because I cannot say someone. It had no features I could describe, no shape I could name. It was there and not there, like a shadow that had forgotten it needed a body to cast it. And it was leaning over my son. Not touching him. Just leaning. Looking. If it had eyes, they were fixed on his face. I tried to scream. I could not. I tried to move. I could not. I could only watch as it leaned closer and closer until its darkness brushed against his blanket. The next lines were smudged. Water damage, I think, or maybe tears that had long since dried. I could only make out fragments. His breathing changed. Reached for him, but my arms. When it left, the cold stayed. And then, clear again, by morning he was gone. The doctor said it was crib death, that sometimes babies just stop breathing and there is nothing to be done. He was very kind. He did not see the marks on the windowsill where the frost had formed into patterns. He did not see the way my son's face had changed, how peaceful it looked, how much older. Like he had aged years in those last few hours. Like whatever had visited him had shown him things no infant should see. The letter ended simply. I am sealing this room. I will plaster over the wall and I will never open it again. I know that what visited James is still here. I hear it sometimes, late at night, still whispering, still waiting. It does not matter that the crib is gone, that the mobile is packed away, that the curtains have been replaced with plain white blinds. It remembers. And if I ever have another child, and God help me, I want to so badly, I will never let them sleep in this room. I will never let them hear what I heard. I will love them at a distance from this corner of the house, and I will hope that is enough. And when I die, maybe someone will find this, and they will know. I was not a bad mother. I was just not strong enough to fight what came for him. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I put the letter back in the envelope. I put the envelope back in the box. I closed the lid, and I sat in my grandmother's kitchen until the light was completely gone and the only illumination was the glow from the clock on the stove. Then I got up, went upstairs with a flashlight, and looked at the hole I'd made in the nursery wall. The hollow was empty now. Just bare lathe and old air. But as I stood there, I noticed something I hadn't before. The space wasn't just a hollow. It went back further than I'd thought, disappearing into shadow beyond my flashlight's reach. And carved into one of the lathe boards, not written, but actually carved, like with a knife or a chisel, was a single word. James. I didn't sleep in the house that night. I drove to a motel in town and stared at the ceiling until morning. Then I went back, and I did something I'm still not sure was the right choice. I replastered the wall. Found supplies at the hardware store in town, watched a YouTube tutorial on my phone, and spent most of the day sealing that hollow back up. I smoothed it over until you couldn't tell anything had ever been there. And I put the box back inside before I finished. The photograph, the lock of hair, the letter, all of it. I returned it to the wall and sealed it away, just like my grandmother had done. Just like she'd wanted. And I left the next morning without finishing the clean-out. I should have sold the house then. That's what a normal person would do. Call the agent, take whatever price I could get, never go back. But I couldn't. And I've thought about why for 6 years now, and I think I finally understand. My grandmother spent 50 years guarding that room. Keeping people away from it. Making sure no one slept there, no one lingered, no one heard what she heard. And even at the end, when she could have told someone, could have told me, she chose to let the secret stay buried. She chose to carry it alone. And now that she's gone, someone has to keep watch. Someone has to remember. I still pay the taxes. Still drive down here every few months to make sure the pipes haven't burst, that the roof hasn't caved, that the house is still standing. I walk through the rooms and I check the windows and I make sure the nursery door is closed. I never open it. I never go in. But sometimes, when I'm standing in the hallway, I press my hand flat against the door and I just listen. I don't know what I expect to hear. Maybe nothing. Maybe the same silence my grandmother hoped for. But sometimes, and I'm telling you this even though I know how it sounds, sometimes I think I hear breathing. Very faint. Very slow. Like someone asleep. Or like someone waiting to wake up. The dream I mentioned earlier, the one that brought me back this time, I should tell you about it. I was in the nursery. Not the sewing room version I remembered, but the original. Yellow curtains, wooden mobile, the crib in the corner. And I was holding a baby. My baby, somehow I don't have children, never have, but in the dream I knew with absolute certainty that this baby was mine. I was rocking it, singing something, and then I heard the voice. That rhythmic, patient whisper. And I looked up at the corner where the wall met the ceiling, and there was something there. Leaning. Watching. And it wasn't looking at the baby. It was looking at me. And it smiled, if something without features can smile, and it said my name. Not James. My name. And I woke up with tears on my face and a word caught in my throat that I couldn't quite remember. I'm still sitting in my car. It's getting dark now, and the farmhouse has that particular quality that empty houses get at dusk, like it's holding its breath, like it's watching back. I should go inside. Check the locks, check the pipes, check the door at the end of the hallway. That's what I came here to do. That's what I always come here to do. But I keep thinking about what my grandmother wrote. About how she heard it say James's name, and how her son looked at the corner and smiled. About how she spent 50 years trying to protect anyone else from hearing it. And I keep thinking about my dream, and about how it said my name, and about what that might mean. There's something I haven't told you yet. Something I only discovered last year, when I was going through old county records for a completely unrelated reason. Before my grandparents bought this house in 1967, another family lived here. The Marshalls. They had a son. He died in 1931, when he was 3 weeks old. Crib death, the record said. And before the Marshalls, another family. The Perrys. They had a daughter who died in 1908, at 2 weeks old. Crib death. And before them, going back as far as the records go, to the 1870s when this house was first built, there were others. Babies who lived for days or weeks. Babies who stopped breathing in the night. Babies whose names are carved into headstones in the cemetery at the edge of town, all in a row, like a terrible collection. I don't know what lives in that room. I don't know if lives is even the right word. But I know it's been there longer than my grandmother, longer than anyone who's ever owned this land. I know it's patient. I know it waits. And I know that every time a child sleeps under this roof, it comes to listen. To whisper. To lean over their crib and show them something that makes them smile in a way no baby should smile. And then, if no one is strong enough to stop it, to take them somewhere I can't follow. My grandmother wasn't strong enough. The Marshalls weren't. The Perrys weren't. And I don't know if I am either. But I'm the one who's here now. I'm the one who knows. So I'm the one who keeps the door closed. I'm going to go inside now. Check the locks. Check the pipes. Check the door. I'll stand in the hallway and press my hand against it and I'll listen, like I always do. And maybe tonight I'll hear nothing. Maybe the silence will hold. Or maybe I'll hear breathing. Maybe I'll hear my name, called in a voice that sounds like it's been speaking since before there were words. And I'll leave, like I always do, and I'll drive back to Portland, and I'll tell myself that as long as I keep watch, as long as someone remembers, the door will stay closed. I have to believe that. It's the only thing that lets me sleep. Before I go, I want to tell you something. If you ever inherit an old house, a house with history, with closed-off rooms, with walls that seem newer than they should be, don't open them. Don't look for secrets. Some things are sealed away for a reason. Some doors are better left closed. And some voices, once you've heard them, never really stop speaking. They just wait. Patient. Rhythmic. Counting the seconds until you fall asleep. Until you forget to listen. Until you stop keeping watch. I won't stop. I can't. But when I'm gone, I don't know who will take my place. I don't know who will press their hand against the door and hold the silence in. Maybe you. Maybe no one. Maybe it won't matter by then. One last thing. When I replastered that wall, when I sealed the box back inside, I added something of my own. A letter. Addressed to no one, sealed with a circle of red wax, just like my grandmother's. In it, I wrote everything I've told you tonight. The history of the house. The names of the babies. The thing that lives in the corner where the wall meets the ceiling. And at the end, I wrote, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are the one who found it. You are the one who knows. And now you have a choice. You can walk away. Pretend you never saw it. Let the house fall down around the door and hope that's enough. Or you can stay. Keep watch. Press your hand against the wood and listen for breathing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But this is what we do. This is what we've always done. This is for after. It's fully dark now. The house is just a shape against the sky, a deeper black against the black. I can see the window of the nursery from here, and there's no light inside, no movement, nothing. Just glass reflecting the stars. But sometimes, and I'm watching it right now as I say this, sometimes I think the reflection shifts. Like something is passing in front of it, on the other side. Something tall. Something that moves without walking. Something that's been watching me watch it for 6 years, patient, rhythmic, waiting for the moment I forget to close the door. I haven't forgotten. I won't forget. But I have to go inside now. I have to check. And if I don't come back out, if this is the night the silence breaks, then at least you know. At least someone heard me. At least the story is somewhere other than the wall. Thank you for listening. I mean that. Sometimes I feel like the only person in the world who knows this is real, and saying it out loud even to strangers, even in the dark, makes it easier to carry. My grandmother carried it alone for 50 years. I've only been carrying it for 6, and some nights the weight of it feels like it might crush me. But I go inside anyway. I check the locks. I check the pipes. I stand in front of the door and I listen. And as long as I can still hear nothing, as long as the silence holds, I know I've done my job. I've kept watch. I've remembered. That has to be enough. I have to believe that's enough. Okay. I'm going in now. The door is waiting. Wish me luck.